All right, get ready to dive deep because today we're tackling one of metal's most legendary rivalries, Metallica versus Megadeth.
Two absolute giants of thrash metal.
Yeah, but their story goes way beyond just being in the same genre. Their history is tangled up, man.
Absolutely, and that's what makes this so interesting, right? We're going to dig into how Dave Mustaine's dramatic exit from Metallica didn't just lead to hurt feelings, but actually sparked the creation of Megadeth.
A real turning point.
It was. We'll be looking at the roots of their feud and asking, did it hold them back, or did it actually push both bands to become even more huge?
Like, could they have reached those legendary heights without this rivalry?
It's a great question, and we're going to explore that. We'll also touch on the stories that you won't find in your typical music bio, those behind-the-scenes moments.
The good stuff. And of course, no deep dive into this rivalry would be complete without looking at the fans. They've played a huge role in how this whole thing has played out over the decades.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
So, to kick things off, let's rewind back to 1983, the year Mustaine gets the boot from Metallica. Substance abuse issues were swirling, personality clashes, the whole nine yards.
It was a recipe for, well, for what happened.
Right, and it wasn't just a simple band member swap. It was this powder keg moment that set everything in motion.
It's like, imagine the intensity, the emotion that goes into a situation like that.
Totally. And Mustaine wasn't gonna just walk away quietly. He channeled all that energy, all that anger into forming Megadeth, and his mission was crystal clear. Build a band that would blow Metallica out of the water. Faster, heavier, more aggressive. It's almost like turning rejection into rocket fuel.
A classic I'll show you move.
Yeah.
But the thing is, Mustaine wasn't just some dude they picked up along the way. He'd already contributed to some early Metallica tracks, like The Four Horsemen. It actually evolved from his own song Mechanics.
That's right. Which begs the question, just how much influence did he really have on Metallica's sound? And that's something that's been debated for years.
Oh yeah, the fans have gone deep on this one.
They have. It's like a whole subculture of metal archaeology, digging through old interviews and demos trying to figure out the truth. Some say Metallica wouldn't be Metallica without his early contributions, while others think his influence has been, exaggerated over time.
But either way, it shows you how deeply fans connect with this whole thing. It's not just about the music. It's about the story, the drama.
Definitely. And this debate about Mustaine's early work adds a whole other layer to the rivalry. Like, it's a competition for creative ownership, almost. But what's undeniable is that Megadeth, from day one, was fueled by this burning need to outdo Metallica.
Like it was baked into their DNA.
Right, and you can hear that fire in their music. If you compare early Metallica with early Megadeth, there's a clear difference in how they approach things.
Tell me more. I'm curious.
While Metallica was honing that classic thrash sound, Megadeth was pushing the envelope with super intricate riffs, complex song structures, and Mustaine's vocals, which had this real snarl to them.
So they weren't just trying to replicate Metallica.
No way. It was about forging their own path, a path that was arguably even more aggressive and technically challenging.
And it wasn't just about being fast and loud. Mustaine brought a lyrical depth to Megadeth that was, at times, more introspective and politically charged than what you were hearing from Metallica in those early days.
Yeah, it's like he was using the music to explore his own inner demons, but also to make listeners think critically about the world around them.
So while the media loved to play up the personal beef between Mustaine and James Hetfield, Metallica's frontman, there was something bigger at play.
Exactly. They were both tapping into the anxieties and frustrations of a generation, right? It wasn't just music. It was a voice for a certain part of society.
Two sides of the same coin, both reflecting that rebellious spirit of the time. And as both bands evolved, you can almost hear this unspoken dialogue happening between their music. Like, take Metallica's Master of Puppets, a huge album that took thrash to a whole new level. And then you have Megadeth's Rust in Peace, an absolute masterpiece that showed off their own musical prowess, both pushing the boundaries of thrash, but in their own distinct ways.
And that's where the sonic arms race idea comes in. It wasn't just about one-upping each other. It was about pushing thrash metal in different directions, expanding what the genre could be.
A constant back and forth.
Exactly. Metallica might experiment with harmonies and melodies, and then Megadeth would fire back with even more mind-blowing rhythms and darker lyrics. It's like they were having this musical conversation, challenging and inspiring each other, even as they competed for the top spot.
So this rivalry, born from a pretty dramatic split, ends up playing out on this grand stage of musical innovation. And the fans, they're right there in the thick of it, analyzing every riff and every lyric, shaping the narrative as it unfolds.
Yeah, and that fan perspective is key. Honestly, without their passion, their debates, their dedication, I don't think this would be the legendary rivalry it is today. They took it from behind-the-scenes drama to a cultural touchstone for metalheads everywhere.
Which makes you wonder how much of the rivalry we see is actually shaped by the fans themselves.
Yeah.
Are we projecting our own interpretations onto these bands, creating a story that goes beyond what actually went down?
Now, that's a thought-provoking question, and it's something we'll delve into even further as we go deeper into this metal saga. But before we do, let's shift our focus to that moment that really ignited this whole thing. Mustaine's dramatic departure from Metallica. So yeah, Mustaine's exit from Metallica. It wasn't just your average band member leaving, you
It
know?
was like a bomb going off in the metal world.
Totally. And it wasn't just you're fired. It was more like, here's a bus ticket back to LA. See ya.
Ouch.
Talk about a blow to the ego.
I can't even imagine.
It's the kind of thing that can make or break you, right?
For sure.
And in Mustaine's case, it lit a fire under him. He felt betrayed, like his contributions were being swept under the rug. And that fueled this incredible drive to prove Metallica wrong. Like, I'll show you what I can do.
And you can really hear that in Megadeth's music,
Okay.
especially those early albums, like Killing is My Business and Business is Good. That raw energy, that aggression, it's like he's screaming his frustration into the mic.
Absolutely. But it's not just blind rage, right? What's so interesting about Megadeth is that they were tackling complex themes like political and social commentary in a way that early Metallica didn't really do.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Think about Peace Cells, for example. It's this huge thrash anthem, but it's also making you think about war, propaganda, all that heavy stuff.
It's definitely not your typical party anthem.
Right. It shows that Mustaine was trying to do something different, something more than just be louder and faster than Metallica.
So he was forging his own path, both musically and lyrically.
Exactly. And this is where the fans come in, because for some, Megadeth's willingness to address those big, serious topics made them even more relatable.
Like, they connected with the Mustaine's message.
Yeah, they saw him as this kind of anti-hero, someone who wasn't afraid to speak truth to power, even if it pissed some people off. And there's also this whole other side of the fan discussion, which is about how the rivalry shaped both bands' careers.
Oh yeah, like, did they influence each other's musical direction?
Exactly. Like, did Metallica's massive success with the Black Album kind of push Megadeth towards their own more radio-friendly sound on Countdown to Extinction?
It's like this subconscious game of one-upmanship.
Right. And it's almost impossible to separate the bands from the rivalry at this point. They're so intertwined, you know? It makes you wonder if their music would evolve the same way without that constant push and pull.
It's a fascinating thought experiment. And it wasn't just the music that was affected. The rivalry even influenced the whole visual style of thrash metal.
Oh, yeah, big time.
The artwork, the logos, the stage presence, both bands cultivated this image of rebellion, of raw power. It was a look that totally resonated with a generation that was fed up with the way things were.
Definitely. And clothing became a huge part of it. Fans weren't just listening to Metallica or Megadeth, they were wearing it, living it.
Like they were part of this movement.
Exactly. The rivalry created a whole subculture with its own fashion, its own language, its own rituals.
And speaking of rituals, we can't forget about concerts. That's where the rivalry really came to life.
Oh, the energy at those shows was insane.
Fans would argue about everything. Who put on a better show? Who had the best solos? Who was the more captivating frontman? It was intense.
It was more than just a concert. It was an experience, a battle.
And I think that's part of what makes this rivalry so enduring. It's more than just good versus evil. It's this story about two incredibly talented, incredibly driven guys, both shaped by this shared past, pushing each other to do amazing things.
And as their careers went on, the rivalry seemed to, cool down a bit. There were collaborations, tributes, even moments where they publicly acknowledged each other's work.
Like a grudging respect.
Yeah. But the legend of that initial split, the fight for thrash metal dominance, it still captivates fans today. It's like the foundation of their legacies. So now, let's shift gears and look at how the Metallica-Megadeth rivalry shaped the course of metal music as a whole. Did their constant battle elevate the entire genre, or did it create a divide that held them back?
Welcome back to the show. Before the break, we were talking about the big question. How did this rivalry between Metallica and Megadeth impact metal music as a whole? Did it push the genre forward, or did it kind of split things up?
It's a tough one. It's a question that metal fans and, music historians still argue about. What's for sure is that both bands were super important in creating what we think of as classic thrash metal. They brought the speed, the aggression, the technical skills, and that darker lyrical feel.
And it's interesting how their styles, though both coming from thrash, went in different directions. Metallica, they seem to want to reach a bigger audience, experimenting with melody and song structure. Like their Black album, that one was huge.
Yeah, for sure. And Megadeth, they often went deeper with their lyrics, tackling political and social issues. Albums like Rust in Peace and Countdown to Extinction really made you think about things like war, corruption, and injustice. They attracted a different kind of fan, someone who wanted their metal to make them think, to challenge them.
And that's where the fan's perspective is so important. Critics can analyze the music, but it's the fans who decide what a band's legacy is. So did this rivalry divide metalheads into camps, like you were either Team Metallica or Team Megadeth? Or did it actually help people appreciate the different kinds of thrash out there?
I think it was probably a bit of both, to be honest. The rivalry definitely led to some, heated arguments. People would argue about who was faster, heavier, more technical. Online forums would be full of debates about which band sold out. But I think all that passion, even the negative stuff, kept people talking about these bands, dissecting their music, and that actually introduced more people to thrash metal.
It's like sometimes even bad press is good press.
Exactly. So even the arguments and negativity helped keep the spotlight on both bands.
Do you think Metallica would have gotten as big as they did without Megadeth? Right there, pushing them? It's hard to know for sure, but I think the rivalry definitely played a role.
Yeah, and Megadeth, even though they never got quite as famous as Metallica, they found their own place. They appealed to fans who wanted something a little more raw, a little more challenging, both musically and intellectually.
So they both kind of created their own spaces within thrash metal, each band catering to a slightly different audience, pushing the boundaries in their own way. And that variety made the genre richer overall.
Totally. And we can't forget about the other bands who were inspired by Metallica and Megadeth. Tons of groups came up after them, taking inspiration from their energy, their rebelliousness, and their willingness to try new things in metal. It's like they created a roadmap showing what was possible with metal.
A blueprint for a whole generation of musicians.
Yeah.
And that influence is still felt today. You hear bands referencing Metallica and Megadeth all the time, using parts of their sound, their look, their attitude, and their own music.
It shows you how much of an impact they've had. Decades later, we're still talking about them, analyzing their music, debating their influence. It's a pretty amazing legacy.
So even though the rivalries calmed down over the years, with both Mustaine and Hetfield, showing respect for each other, the story of their feud is still a big deal in metal.
Yeah, for sure. It reminds us that sometimes the most creative energy comes from conflict, from that clash of personalities and the desire to prove yourself.
And who knows, maybe that competitive spirit is still there, pushing both bands to make music that challenges and excites us.
Absolutely. So the next time you're listening to Metallica or Megadeth, remember, you're not just hearing music, you're experiencing a piece of metal history, a story of rivalry, ambition, and incredible creativity.
And if all this talk about Metallica and Megadeth has you in the mood to show off your metal pride, go check out nhcclothing.com. We've got designs for every metalhead out there.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the epic rivalry of Metallica and Megadeth. Keep listening to great music, and we'll catch you next time.